friends, the healthiest rice is not what you think. This is because of marketing that has fooled generations of cultures into eating a single colored rice, white, to their peril. So now if you see a colored variety, you automatically assume it's a health food. But did you know that the rice that you may be eating is a harbinger of carcinogens, even if it's slightly colored? But there are some easy ways to remove just about 60% of those carcinogens before you even eat them. Now, how do you pick rice besides its color? Did you know that depending on the type of grain, you may be inadvertently spiking your blood sugars more than necessary? And just by preparing them a certain way and eating them with specific foods, you can actually reduce the effects on your blood sugars, even if you eat white rice. Now, I used to cook rice in a rice cooker, and despite its convenience, it's actually not the safest way to prepare rice, especially if your rice cooker is made out of aluminum. So after you watch this video, you will be more informed on how to choose the healthiest rice and how to prepare it for you and your family to eat. You have probably eaten rice your entire life and you haven't noticed any bad effects. Well, the thing is, you may not notice any bad effects until you grow older. But if you went to see a doctor, would they be able to notice some bad effects from your rice? Probably so. Some people consider rice to be a mitochondria toxin, contributing to diabetes. But I'll tell you what the data actually shows about rice and how it actually affects your mitochondria a little bit later. For billions of people around the world, white rice has been the first food that they ate as an infant. When I had my first child, my mother-in-law suggested that we start feeding him white rice. So instead of actually making rice myself, I actually bought those powdered rice cereal boxes. You know, the ones that they have labeled for infants as their very first food. You basically add water to it, kind of like mashed potatoes. I really regret doing that, but at the time I was super busy. I was actually never really in one place to have a kitchen. I was still in training so I can practice medicine, and it was really hard to find time to cook, even cooking rice. And as my son grew older, I introduced more foods. I actually bought rice milk because he couldn't tolerate dairy. And that's when I learned that rice milk had high amounts of arsenic. In fact, all rice absorbs 10 times more arsenic than any other grain. And it's simply because rice, you need a lot of water to grow it. And rice paddies are usually flooded. Arsenic then dissolves into the water, which allows rice to pull it up very easily. And you can accumulate arsenic over time and get a condition called arsenocosis, which can cause changes in your skin pigmentation, cancer, nausea, diarrhea, peripheral neuropathy, which is numbness and tingling. It can cause muscle weakness, and you can even have heart arrhythmias and heart failure, which also results in difficulty breathing and exacerbating coughs. It could be so severe that people go into seizures and comas. Now, how do we know all this? Well, an entire country got arsenic poisoning from drinking contaminated well water. This happened in the 1970s, where UNICEF decided to install tube wells to bring people of Bangladesh clean water. Well, unfortunately, they forgot to check the arsenic in that clean water. And as a result, 70 million people got poisoned with arsenic. So this is why the country of origin of your rice is very important. So here's a table of the amount of arsenic in rice based on the country of origin. Now, if you are from a big country like the United States, one county is very different from another county. So that you really need to take that into consideration, because the rice from the Midwest and the South collect a ton more arsenic than rice grown in California. So that's why I choose to eat rice from California. Consumer Reports also tested a whole bunch of rice. And here is their chart. Now, this chart doesn't just outline arsenic, but it also reports total lead and cadmium. And if you notice on this chart, there's a brand name called Lundberg based in California. White basmati rice from them was much lower than the white rice from the Midwest. Now, the nice thing about Lundberg is that they actually test their white products and they tell their customers. But you will notice that brown rice has a higher amount of arsenic than white rice. And unfortunately, this is true throughout all white rice compared to brown rice. So just by eating a colored rice may not be so healthy. As a kid, I loved long grain rice. Just the texture to me was so appealing. And based on the 284-page FDA report on arsenic in rice, well, they show that long grain rice contains more arsenic than shorter grain rice. And this just may be because in California, they grow more short grain rice. So what about colored rice? Like red or black? Well, potentially it actually can have less arsenic depending on where the rice is grown. But unfortunately, rice also collects other heavy metals like cadmium, and they may have more cadmium than your traditional white rice. So just like chocolate, you could be low in arsenic, but higher in cadmium. But consistently, brown rice has higher levels of cadmium than white rice. And brown rice is essentially the same rice, except that this rice is missing the bran, the outer shell. And just by removing the outer layer of this brown rice, you can actually significantly reduce your cadmium and arsenic levels in your rice. However, even though brown rice has more arsenic than white rice, you actually may not absorb all the arsenic in brown rice because that fiber of the rice probably traps in some of that arsenic and cadmium, and you just basically poop it out in the toilet bowl. So fiber is protective against the absorption of toxins. And the amount of arsenic that you eat in your foods can actually be measured in your urine. And that's what people did. They measured pee to see exactly how much arsenic that people were absorbing after they eat white rice versus brown rice. And it appears that by this observational study that even brown rice, even though it has more arsenic, you can actually pee out the same amount as if you're eating white rice. Many people suggest mixing the two rices to minimize your arsenic exposure. However, that may not be the best way to reduce arsenic. Chances are you didn't grow up eating a whole grain rice, whether it's brown, black, or red. Rice is delicious whether you boil it in water, wrap it in spring roll, snap, crackle, popping it in milk as a cereal, smothered with a spread as a cracker, sticky as mochi, or as long as a noodle. This is white rice. These are all foods based on white rice. And this is why rice is the most popular food around the world. You can make so many different textures. Unfortunately, it's also one of the least nutritious foods. White rice is basically pure starch. And so for generations, people have eaten this nutrient deficient grain and literally died. In fact, white rice is how we discovered the most important micronutrient for energy, thiamine, vitamin B1, that powers your mitochondria so that you can process this starch. So when you pick any other colored rice, whether it's brown, black, purple, or red, you will have upgraded your nutritional content simply because it has thiamine. Billions of people underappreciate the importance of this single vitamin, vitamin B1, to protect you from diabetes, dementia, and heart failure, and other cardiovascular diseases. Thiamine is essentially the energy vitamin, no matter what diet you eat. Whether you're on a diet or not, or whether you're eating the standard American diet, carnivore diet, or keto diet, there is no way you will survive without thiamine. So the 1 after B1 means more than just being the first B vitamin discovered. It is literally the number 1 vitamin for life. It is the reason why you won't survive when you fast or starve from food. And you really won't fully appreciate thiamine until you understand the history of B1 and pigeons. Let me ask you a question. How do you know you need more thiamine? Have you noticed what people reach for when they run out of energy? A sugary beverage? Well, I don't do that. I actually take a thiamine supplement. Thiamine is a rate-limiting step to making energy. I don't look like I'm depleted of energy. I'm carrying plenty of energy around me every day. But you're not really lacking the energy molecule. What we're lacking is the ability to convert those energy molecules. And this is the power of micronutrients like thiamine. Unfortunately, your body can't invent them. You actually need to eat them. This is why they're called essential vitamins. And when you lack vitamin B1, you will feel fatigued, and eventually you may be so weak that you may be paralyzed and unable to walk. And by that time, you're probably just speaking gibberish if you're speaking at all. And when you present to a real medical doctor in the emergency room, they may look at you and notice that you're short of breath. You may have chest pain. And this could be all from Beri or congestive heart failure. And why is the heart so sensitive? Well, think about who works the hardest in your body. Your heart literally has to pump 24/7 to move your gallons of water inside your body, throughout your whole body. How can you sustain that without energy? Your brain needs to be active 24/7 even though you're sleeping. And when your heart stops, you have less than 5 minutes to get that pump to restart, or you will suffer permanent anoxic encephalopathy, which is irreversible brain damage. So your organs, like your brain and your heart, they are active at all times. It constantly needs a supply of energy, but it needs to be able to convert that energy. So just eating calories is not going to keep you alive. And there is not a single essential micronutrient that won't affect your brain when you're deficient. If you're lacking thiamine, vitamin B1, you get a condition called Wernicke's encephalopathy. This is your brain shutting down. You literally won't be able to talk or move. But before you get such severe brain symptoms, the nerves most distant from your heart will suffer first because they don't get access to nutrients. That is peripheral neuropathy. If you have nerve damage, like peripheral neuropathy, you will feel tingling and pain in your feet until it's so damaged that there's no more pain. There's actually specific things that you can do to remove the arsenic in any rice that you choose to eat. So number one, I would rinse your rice until it's clear, right? That's what my mom has always taught me, to rinse it until it's clear. And she used to save that water to put in her plants. And now I know that's a wrong thing to do, because basically you're rinsing out the arsenic and then putting into your plants. The second thing you do is when you cook the rice, you want to dump out that rice water. I usually dump it 2 or 3 times after it boils to remove all the inorganic arsenic that comes out of the rice as you're cooking it, because arsenic is water soluble. And you can't do that if you have a rice cooker, right? In a rice cooker, rinse the rice, you press a button, and then you let it cook and it's nice and fluffy. Well, that's the best way to accumulate arsenic in your rice. So this is brown rice. You see this color? That's called the bran. The outer shell is where the essential nutrients are at, like vitamin B1. So any of these colored rice would have vitamin B1. And do you know how people figure that out? Pigeons. In the late 19th century, a Dutch scientist observed that pigeons fed a diet of polished white rice developed symptoms similar to beriberi. But when they fed the pigeons rice bran, they recovered. All mammals require thiamine. Thiamine deficiency is not just required for people. Thiamine deficiency doesn't just kill mammals and birds. In fact, fish require thiamine. And so if you actually eat food that has thiaminases, which prevents your absorption of thiamine, you can get in trouble too. And that's a problem with alcohol. Alcohol reduces the absorption of thiamine. And this is why people who drink a lot of alcohol get more brain insults, because they're literally removing thiamine even though they're eating food. Thiamine deficiency actually took down the Imperial Japanese Navy. Tens of thousands of their soldiers died because all they thought about was eating calories and feeling satiated. Guess what they ate? Polished white rice. Southeast Asia suffered tens of thousands of deaths from people eating polished white rice in the 1800s. Many people didn't understand that white rice is a highly processed, nutrient-deficient food. And this is because it was traditionally a luxury food only available to the wealthy elites in Asia. So it's been eaten for thousands of years. But in the old days, to make white rice, you had to pound it by hand. Imagine how difficult it is to make white rice. So if you don't have time to do that, you're not going to do that, right? So only the elites could hire helpers to help them do that. So most people didn't go out of their way to eat white rice. They just basically ate the rice whole. In fact, a lot of food the wealthy used to eat was to their detriment. Look at King Henry. Does he look like the epitome of health? So in the old days, only the wealthy people got these diseases because of their selective diets. So why did white rice get so popular around the world? Well, first of all, it's pretty tasty. Have you tried some? But white rice also has the advantage of storing and easy cooking. So by removing these outer layers of the bran, the rice is made softer, therefore easier to cook. And it also lasts longer.
Hi friends, I am so thrilled that you want to take charge of your health and take charge of your food. Now, I know nutrition can be complex, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm here to support you in this lifelong journey. So if you point your camera app to this QR code, it'll take you to a link for a free handout that I created just for you. And if you like it, if you want to see other handouts, please go to the link in my show notes, and then you can leave me your feedback on what I could do to help you in your journey. Okay, back to the video now.
So in the 17th and 18th centuries, mechanical milling techniques began to develop in Japan and China. This allowed for the removal of the bran, the color of the rice. And during the Industrial Revolution in the 18th, 19th century, steam power rice mills improved large-scale production. And in the late 19th century and early 20th century, the mechanized roller mill became common, producing even whiter, more refined rice. So the global rise of polished white rice led to a surge of thiamine deficiency in poor people who had very restrictive diets and caused this epidemic of Beri. This is a nutrient deficient food. So instead of discouraging people from eating white rice, the World Health Organization encouraged countries to fortify essential vitamins in processed grains. Do you really think that's good advice? What kind of message do you think that sends? So instead of telling people not to eat this food and to eat colored rice, we've now enabled processed food companies to make all different delicious textures with this starch and pretend that we're feeding the world, making them healthier because we're fortifying it with essential vitamins. Now take a look at this graph. These are the countries that continue to require fortification in grains like rice. Well, America did that, and we now fortified our processed grains with essential B vitamins. And guess where that has gotten us? Take a look at this graph. These are the obesity rates around the world. Interesting coincidence, isn't it? Notice how there's low obesity rates in Southeast Asia and Japan because they don't fortify their rice. Ironically, the Japanese remain still pretty skinny as a population, despite the fact that sumo wrestling have been a coveted sport and a part of their imperial culture for centuries. So essentially, we've traded an acute problem of vitamin deficiencies for chronic metabolic diseases associated with overeating micronutrient deficient foods. The widespread consumption of white rice is an industrialized engineered invention. When it takes a machine to manipulate a food, this is ultra-processed food. This is the world's first ultra-processed food that's been accepted and confused to be a whole food for generations globally. I grew up eating this stuff. This was my favorite food. In fact, I can enjoy eating this with just ketchup. And my parents ate rice every day, and my mom would eat this with soy sauce. That was tasty too. But my parents did something very unusual, and I've never met anybody who did what they did. For as long as I remember, they took a couple of B vitamins every day, and that included vitamin B1. They tried to actually get me to take it, but I wouldn't because it tastes as bitter as chalk. My dad was the one who insisted that my parents take vitamin B1. And even with my mom's dementia, she remembered to take her vitamin B1. And this is because of the devastating history in Asia. He was actually an Asian history teacher. A few years ago, I had the privilege of attending a school field trip with my son to Europe. I thoroughly loved the history, but he basically said to me, "Mom, I don't really care to learn about dead people." And unfortunately, I think his attitude is prevalent in society because millions of us have forgotten the devastating history of events that have occurred around the globe because of micronutrient deficiencies, eating highly refined processed foods. And it's not just Asia. European sailors, they may not have suffered the devastating casualties of thiamine deficiency, but thousands of them succumb to the effects of scurvy, which is vitamin C deficiency. You will succumb to vitamin C deficiency just a few weeks after vitamin B1 deficiency. They essentially ate a restrictive diet of carbohydrates with meat, dried meat with wheat biscuits. And today we're essentially eating like the Imperial Japanese or European sailors with our versions of turkey sandwiches, hamburgers, pizzas, hot dogs, chicken and rice, chicken and biscuits, or Korean barbecue with rice. Pick your nutrient deficient poisons. These restrictive diets focus on taste and textures, calories, and neglect essential micronutrients. There is essentially a lack of diversity. So why didn't the European sailors die of thiamine deficiency? It's because they ate the whole grain, the whole wheat. They didn't strip the bran out. And when the Japanese Navy added barley to their diet, they were able to avoid thiamine deficiency. So when you remove the fiber in your foods, it's not the fiber that is keeping you alive. It's essential nutrients. And whether it's refined rice or refined wheat flour, you're basically removing essential nutrients that keeps your lights on, keeps you alive because it gives you energy. And all you need is 2 weeks. That's how long it will take for you to get to zero when it comes to thiamine. You don't even have to lift a finger. But if you're active at all, you will get to zero much faster because your body will use up that thiamine faster to fuel your body with energy. So the most common symptom of thiamine deficiency is fatigue. Think about how often you feel fatigued despite drinking that sugary soda or coffee. How many of your colleagues complain they're tired, guzzling down caffeine? People wonder why I'm not tired, even though I don't drink coffee. It's because I make sure I get my thiamine. They wonder why my older brother can swim an hour every morning, work a full-time job, and on top of that, walk over 20,000 steps every day and still have energy for his family, for his daily household chores, and his daily Bible studies. He has a nutritional advantage because he's actually a PhD biochemist. And he didn't start his health journey by listening to misguided internet gurus to encourage you to restrict your food options. Have you noticed that all these restrictive diets, whether it's carnivore or keto, are based in America? Now, do you think Americans are qualified to make up their diet and lifestyles that will beat the longevity of ancient cultures? Have you noticed that these fad diets are not really popular around the globe? Are you really going to teach a Kenyan marathon runner how to power his body? Do you think that carb loading with mac and cheese is how they do it? Do you think that champion tennis players are eating plant-based diets because they're trying to make a political statement? It's ironic that despite the fact that Asia went through prolonged periods of starvation, malnutrition, and vitamin deficiencies, that they are still the longest living cultures in the world. Longevity cultures are not comparing their glucose levels, their insulin levels, or their cholesterol levels. And these people honestly have a nutritional advantage that many Americans lack. Their parents, they remember past struggles and know what a balanced meal should actually look like. In contrast, Americans have learned our nutrition and health through marketing, whether it's from big food or big pharma. And now it's from social media, internet gurus. Now, I grew up with my parents telling me the benefits of plants like Chinese celery. Literally, they plucked a leaf and chewed it in front of me to demonstrate how easy it is to eat plants. My dad grew a ton of fruits in our backyard, and he was so proud of his variety of dates. He had this one little date bush that grew dark purple colored tiny dates that maybe was as big as a blueberry. And he would tell me about its health benefits, which basically went in one ear and out the other. But obviously the general ideas stuck. Now your kids may not appreciate your efforts now, but they are listening and they will remember general principles. And I have the same struggles with my children. I am constantly trying to get them to eat better. And they always tell me that they think they're doing enough and they don't want to hear a lecture to eat. They used to tell me nobody wanted to hear me lecture about food. Well, now that I have a YouTube channel, they stopped saying that to me. And honestly, that's probably the best part of my YouTube journey, that now I can literally show my kids that you may not want to listen to me, but look at how many people care about what they eat and how they should take care of their health. There are so many people that falsely believe that eating rice will give them diabetes. That's really only partially true. It depends on what you're eating with the rice. So for example, if all you eat was this white rice, I mean, it's obviously not a survival food, right? But you're not going to get diabetic. And this has been proven in history. Our country is so innovative because people are willing to try some of the kookiest idea. Did you know that there is such a thing as a rice diet? It's literally been proven to reverse high blood pressure, obesity, and diabetes. There was a physician named Walter Kepner who put people on a rice diet. He invented it. So people lost a ton of weight. They lowered their insulin and their blood sugars. And the reason is because the highest drivers of insulin is actually not carbohydrates. And this is really not intuitive because when you eat carbohydrates, you require insulin to be able to process it. Glucose is what you see as a blood sugar rise when you eat any carbohydrates. And so how quickly your glucose goes down is really a symptom of how efficient your mitochondria is working. It's basically your mitochondrial health. So if you don't eat any carbohydrates, you're not going to be able to actually test your mitochondria, and therefore you're not going to see blood sugar rises because you're not eating any carbohydrates to elevate your blood sugars. But people have confused the rise of blood sugars, the symptom of mitochondria dysfunction, with the toxins of mitochondria. Now, I think we can all agree that arsenic and lead, they are mitochondria toxins. But glucose is not a mitochondrial toxin because literally you need glucose to fuel your body on a daily basis. Your brain requires glucose, so do special cells in your eyes and your red blood cells. They can't use fat. Your brain can use fat, but not certain cells in your eyes. And it's so critical for your survival that your liver is assigned to make glucose for your brain, even if you don't eat any carbohydrates. That's how essential glucose is to your body. So when your glucose goes a certain level down, you basically will pass out. So glucose by itself is not a mitochondrial toxin. It cannot be. Otherwise, you wouldn't survive childhood. So people have confused what's actually killing their mitochondria with the symptoms of the mitochondria getting poisoned, which is elevated blood sugars. So if the toxin isn't eating glucose, then what is? So if you don't eat any glucose, whether you're eating ketogenic or carnivore diet, you may not actually be removing the mitochondria toxin. For example, heavy metals actually accumulate in body fat. So if you're eating animal fat, you can still be exposed to mitochondria toxins that directly kill your mitochondria, but you won't see see the symptoms of high blood sugar because you're not eating any caloric carbohydrates. Follow me? And people just think that sugar or carbohydrates or a glucose spike is the only symptom of mitochondrial toxicity, and that's false. So then you get a false sense of security thinking that you're eating good foods, but when in actuality, you are eating things that may be poisoning your mitochondria. So if you actually biopsy your muscle tissues, because it contains a lot of mitochondria, and then challenge them with glucose or given yourself a glucose tolerance test, then you will see the abnormal blood sugar spikes after that challenge to tell you that your mitochondria has been poisoned with whatever lifestyle you're choosing to do. I don't think a lot of people understand this concept, and they think that their restrictive diets is a healthy diet simply because they don't see blood sugar spikes, their insulin levels are down, but they're down because you're not eating anything to require insulin to work. Now, I'm not discounting that initially you may have improved your mitochondrial health by removing other forms of toxins, those toxins that are in processed carbohydrates. But the reason why, if you overeat carbohydrates or of any sort, whether it's white rice or flour or wheat flour, is because your body converts excess carbohydrates into saturated fat. And saturated fat is a proven mitochondrial toxin. And I know a lot of people don't want to believe that, but it's been proven for almost a century. So if you don't want to spike your blood sugars and be able to eat rice, no matter what form, then it's important not to eat saturated fat. So rice and meat is the last combination people should be eating, especially because our meats are getting fatter. And if you want to eat your blood sugars after eating white rice, just by reducing the amount of meat and fat that you are eating, you will see that your blood sugars will improve every day. Maybe start by skipping, a meal with meat, and then you can make it every other day, and then maybe make it, twice a week. This will help you tolerate rice if you want to eat it. And another way to reduce your blood sugars is actually to refrigerate cooked rice. So if you refrigerate cooked rice, and you want to make sure that you refrigerate immediately after cooking it, because rice can have toxins like spores that actually hatch when you reheat the rice. So you don't want to reheat cooked rice more than once. Or those little tiny spores, which are basically bacterial kind of like eggs, they will hatch with warm temperatures, and then you'll get food poisoning. That's the eating leftover fried rice syndrome. But if you refrigerate white rice or really any grain, you can actually increase the resistant starch that acts like a fiber in your gut. Resistant starch is unable to be degraded by your body. And so when you convert the starch, which is highly caloric, right? A lot of people associate rice with spiking blood sugars. If you just reduce the amount of the caloric starch and make them into resistant starch, then right there, you can reduce probably like 30% of your blood sugar levels by eating refrigerated rice. Oh, you can reheat it. You'll still preserve some of its resistant starch. The other thing to do is to walk just 2 minutes after eating any kind of food, really, especially carbohydrate-laden foods. Because if you walk just 2 minutes, of course, it's better to walk more than that, you will actually power your mitochondria to make it more efficient, where that it will then result in lower blood sugars throughout the digestion of that entire meal. If you don't want to spike your blood sugars and eat rice, remember it's important to avoid saturated fat. You don't have to eat saturated fat to build saturated fat. You just have to overeat calories. And it's really easy to overeat soft, starchy foods. So rice and meat is really the last combination people should be eating if they want to be nice to their mitochondria and keep their blood sugars in a normal range. But after watching this extensive video about rice, wouldn't you rather eat other grains that don't collect 10 times more arsenic than any other grain? And if you're interested in doing that, watch the next video.